Hey friends, I am so excited to kick off the Lucy Smiles Living Room podcast with my dear friend Sien Tan. Sien and I got a chance to sit in person before she took off to go back to Canada, studying herbology, immersing herself with Mother Nature. We talk about all things heeding the call in our lives and how the journey of our past helped us to get to where we are today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. So welcome to episode number 001 of the Lucy Smiles Living Room podcast. Oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm feeling, but it feels fabulous. And I'm going to go with it. So we are here on the living room of Lucy Smiles, literally getting cozy, feet up, knees up, whatever works. And really just want to take a minute to say thank you to everyone that's been on my path over the last 18 years. It'll be 18 years on May 12th that I have been utilizing my voice as Lucy Smiles as a channel to support other people to feel inspired, to look at life through the blessings that we have and align ourselves with those. Even though there are burdens that happen in our lives and we go through challenges, how can we take the lessons and how can we still smile? And that is why I have this beautiful soul with me here for my first of many episodes. Sien Tan has been a beautiful soul in my life. The serendipity that got us here right now, sitting in the living room, we'll go through stories around that as well too. But before I share your bio, just wanted to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It's a pleasure to have you here and the beginning of so many stories that we're going to create together. So it's my honor to have you as my first guest in the living room today.
I am so incredibly honored to be here. I'm super excited. And it's been such a beautiful and interesting journey as to how we got here.
Mm-hmm.
Even this morning was an interesting journey to how we got
Always
here.
Interesting.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this talk, and thank you for that gratitude that you sent my way and sending it back to you 100%. You inspire me. I'm so grateful for your presence in my life. And let's just see what magic happens today.
Yes. Let's see what natural vibes show up for us as we converse. But before we do that, I do want to share Sien's amazing bio, if you will, just so you have a little bit of a glimpse of who she is before we really get into conversation. So Sien is a curious co-creator, conspiring with the universe to create a life that inspires others to be their most magical and liberated version of themselves, and encouraging them to share this magic with the world, whether it's through her conversation, yoga, or food creation. Her intent is to remind people of their innate power and wisdom, as well as connection with the earth and all of its creatures. She is the founder and curator of Comida Nutritiva, Foods That Nourish, and Sien in the Sun Yoga is in the process of alchemizing her diverse life experiences and passions and exploring what's next in her journey, which we will explore more in this episode. And I do know some of the new things that you have coming up. And so I'm just honored to be here with you. I just want to sit and converse with you, and whatever shows up for us and for others is going to be perfect. And I feel like I'm honestly already having this moment like I've been here before with you, and it feels like a vortex. So that is where I'm at. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, I feel like we were meant to be here in this moment. And I agree with you. I mean, so many of our conversations are exactly what today is going to be like. We're just here having a conversation. And every time we do that, we discover something new. And we've often said, like, gosh, if we could share just the moments that we share with each other with other people. And so I think in some ways we have been here before.
I feel it. And it's interesting too. So I would love to start with, I was thinking about a title or a topic, what are we discussing today? And then heeding the call came up. And I would love for you to touch on that, because that's part of our serendipitous growth that we have been evolving with together with the book, heeding the call. So if you want to share a little bit more about that, and what does that look like for you? And maybe even to take it a step further, are there any times in your life where you realize that maybe you didn't heed the call? Because I think contrast in what we go through in our lives, everything, it looks so beautiful and you've got everything, is just, you see people at the end result of their success. And I want to really just kind of dial it back today and take a look at all of the parts, all the parts that get us to where we want to go. And some of the parts that maybe we didn't want to pick up, and maybe there are reasons behind that.
Ooh, okay.
Lots of juice.
I
I'll
love
have my
it.
sip of my tea.
Yes, me too.
Yes,
It's very
cheers to us.
juicy.
Juicy.
Should we bring some Spanish in? Salud.
Yes.
Salud.
Okay.
Um,
So share all of it.
Wow. So Heeding the Call. Heeding the Call is a book that was shared with me by a dear, dear person in my life. And it was shared when I returned to Mazatlan from Canada about 6 months ago. And it was a book that started me on the next phase of my journey. So for the past couple of years, there's been a lot that's happened, but there's always been in the back of my mind this question of, what do I want to be when I grow up? And so I think Heeding the Call is part of that journey and discovering, like, what's next. And so it's an amazing, inspiring, magical book. And it has drawn me to my next adventure, which is going to be learning from the land and the plants. And I think learning to listen. I think life gets so busy that we sometimes can't actually hear the calls when they happen. So when you're asking about, is there moments in time where I can look back and think that I hadn't said yes or hadn't taken the opportunity? And I think there may have been, but maybe I don't know what they were, because I couldn't hear the call, because life was so busy, because I allowed life to be so busy, because I was doing things that were perhaps disconnecting me from being able to hear the calls, the signs from the universe, from, our true authentic selves, from that place that we can live passionately and purposefully. And so at the same time, looking back at everything, every choice that I've made in my life, it's brought me to where I am today. And I'm so absolutely grateful and in awe sometimes, and inspired by where I am, the people that are in my life, and the experiences that I get to have. So even those moments where I chose not to do something because I was afraid, and I can look back and think, if I had taken that opportunity, said yes to that person, leaned into the discomfort and done it anyways, I think part of my journey was actually not doing that so that I could be with the fear.
Wow.
And allow the transformation process to happen.
It's interesting too, as you say that, because I'm sitting here in Mexico. We're in Mexico, Mazatlan, Mexico, and that's how I met you, but we're both Canadian. And so one of the calls that you had answered to, I guess, is the journey to come to Mexico. And also knowing your past, your career, your previous career before I met you, to purchase your hummus and your sauerkraut and your fermented goodness that you shared at the market, which is how we met. Tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what brought you to Mexico? And also what did you ignite inside of you to go from, say, maybe the career that you were in previously to doing with the beautiful things that you're doing now? And it's still a journey of the next with herbology and all of that. So what did that look like, and how did you heed that call?
So I moonlight now as a dental hygienist, but that was a bigger part of my life, and it was my profession. So I've been in the dental industry for quite a long time. I think 2001 was when I became a dental assistant, and then I went into hygiene. And at the time, with the lenses that I was wearing and the paradigm that I had, I thought that that's what I needed to do in order to take care of myself and raise my daughter. And I'm really, really grateful for having had that career, because it empowered me in a lot of ways financially, and to be able to be sovereign and autonomous financially. I always knew that it wasn't necessarily my passion. I never kind of grew up thinking that I wanted to clean people's teeth. but there were certain boxes that I wanted to check.
Yeah.
And that was, I didn't want to go to school for a really long time because I was in the midst of raising a young girl at the time. And then I didn't want to do night shift, and I wanted to make good income.
Mm-hmm.
And so dental hygiene kind of checked all of those boxes, or dentistry did. And it was sort of like one step at a time that got me into dental hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm forever grateful for, having had that opportunity. And at the same time, in the back of my mind, I was always thinking, gosh, there's got to be more purpose or more to life than this, because I did feel like I was sort of going to work often just putting in my time.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the patients. I loved the people that I worked with. I enjoyed aspects of the job, and I still do.
Yeah.
But it felt like I was trying to get through the day a little bit so that I could come home and,
Mm-hmm.
be with my daughter or do the things that I really loved to do.
Wow.
And so, yeah, being in dental hygiene. Sorry, what was your question? Can you
Just
go
in
back
terms
to
of the shift for
the
you?
evolution?
Because
Yes.
a lot of times, and I have a corporate background, working in corporate Canada for about a decade before I shifted into entrepreneurship. And for my own self, and I would love to hear your take, is that risk of, not only comfort, but security. And so there's that security that we have with, I can call it like checking in, checking out, no matter what, every 2 weeks you get paid. And so being from that type of mentality, which is great, but having that knowing that you wanted more, what did that look like for you? Was there a catalyst? Was there a book, a mentor, or did something happen in your life that defined the moment, perhaps, or moments where you said, I want to follow my path? And how did Comida Nutritiva even come to birth? Because I've been enjoying it for a year.
Okay.
I'm sad that you're actually going to move on from Mexico on your next, journey. But what did that look like, and how did that birth? What allowed you to say, I am going to do this and move to Mexico? So there's so many different components, and being a mom. We could touch on Jade as well too, a little bit later as well, who she'll be here in 2 sleeps. But what did that look like? What allowed you to say, okay, I'm going to go from this to that? How did you align yourself with that?
Yeah. So after being in the dental world for quite a long time, I wish that I could say that I had had some profound moment of inspiration that allowed me to make a different decision consciously. And in some ways I did, but at the same time, it was the catalyst was actually when the pandemic started. And so in Canada, things changed quite quickly, and very, very early on in the pandemic, I found myself somewhat without a job because they had closed down dental offices. And what I started doing was teaching more yoga at the time, which was amazing, because what I realized is this idea that I had that I couldn't financially sustain myself without doing dental hygiene. All of a sudden, what I didn't recognize as a gift at the time, which is so often how it happens, we look back on our life and we see the gift of what felt very challenging in the moment. And so here I was, sort of quote unquote forced to change my life. And it happened in the perfect time, because I had said for many, many years, like, I want to find a way to do something other than this. And so it was really a gift of, that time just coming in and being like, okay, here's your moment. And so in some ways, it was serendipitous. It happened serendipitously. And I chose, even after dental offices opened up, for multiple reasons, not to go back into dentistry right away. And there was, I would call the pandemic and COVID, or at least the beginning of it, like the dark night of my soul. But going back to that idea of the dark night of the soul is sometimes we've been planted into the earth so that something can grow, right? But when we're planted and we can't really see or sense the light, and we don't know what it's going to look like once we actually birth, that's what it felt like for me. And so coming down to Mexico, I think, was also, looking back, it took courage and bravery to do something completely different. And there was also a part of it that was literally just me needing to take care of my mental health.
Wow.
And step outside of what I felt. There was a lot of trauma that was brought up during the pandemic. And so I needed to step out of my paradigm, out of like the society that I had grown up in, out of all of these things that I had been conditioned to believe. And this trauma was being ignited for a reason to bring me to Mexico, because it's been such an amazing journey. I've learned so much about myself, and I think I've gotten closer to what I feel like is a true purpose or a calling.
Yeah.
And so my process has been moving from a state of how can I live life in a way that serves and nourishes me, right? That idea of I need to take care of my family, I need to raise my daughter, I need to make good money in order to really survive in this world. Yeah. Moving to a place of how can I be in service to others?
Right. And that's been a super success for you here, following you, and, you know, the amazing client base that you have here with the beautiful food that's so nourishing. It's beautiful because when you think about how you started, you know, it's always like filling your cup first, right? And so, and I also even think too, Mexico for many, not to generalize, but I feel like for my own self, in listening to your story, I've learned to get to know myself better. And when you talk about paradigms as well too, I look at sometimes we could be doing something for so long, we assume we should just keep doing it. And things come into our lives for us to take inventory perhaps, or have some reflection. And I felt even for my own self, Mexico has this beautiful gift of allowing us to look within ourselves. And many people that come here, even without knowing, find that some changes happen in their life or evolution happens. And it could be anywhere. I just know from conversation with others and such as yourself, it's a beautiful opportunity anywhere really, but even the pandemic, many people would say that they had to pivot, right? And so I feel like that pivoting for you that led you to Mexico has now led you from Mexico. So maybe explain and share a little bit more about what that looks like. And you've heeded the call again, which is also a huge risk, right? The unknown, I think, is the biggest part that could have us stay stuck. And so maybe what does that look like for you in terms of moving through what you're going to now and the next phase for you?
Yeah, you're so right. The unknown can be such a scary place. And in my own experience, it's been the place of greatest potential. And so every moment that I can look back on in life where I haven't really known how things are going to turn out have been the most magical moments of my life. And so bringing dental hygiene back into it, dental hygiene was very intentional, and I knew how it was going to turn out, and it was a big gift in many ways. But it's the moments where I didn't know how things were going to turn out. So whether it was, moving to Mexico, starting Comida Nutritiva back in the day when I actually did my yoga teacher training and didn't realize that I was doing it because I was going to teach yoga. I was taking it because I wanted to learn more about myself and about this beautiful practice that had been such a support and nourishment. And so this next step, I feel like I'm kind of stepping back into the unknown in some ways. I kind of have an idea of what's being created, but I think that when I'm in ego, that's when I know what's going to happen. Or that's when I know what's going to happen.
Right.
And it's a very, very different feeling. And it feels, you and I were talking the other day about resistance versus surrender. And in these moments where I feel like I have more purpose and I'm leading with that guiding curiosity of how can I serve others and serve the planet. And I think by extension, in moving in that direction, I'm automatically serving myself. And so I can kind of let go of that piece and just trust that that's being taken care of in really like living passionately. But it's in those moments where I can be in the unknown and I can surrender that the magic truly happens, and it starts to be carried by something bigger than I am. So that's where Comida Nutritiva, my food company, was birthed, I guess. And again, I didn't have like a set idea of what I wanted to do.
Right.
I was sitting there creating these amazing, nourishing foods for myself. And one day I can just remember being in the kitchen and I had this like thought, this voice that came to me. And it was like, I wonder if other people would love this too.
Wow.
And so it was little steps
Yeah.
along the way, which I feel like right now it's little steps as well. I have an idea of what it is that I want to do next, but with Comida Nutritiva, it started with the fermentation and the sauerkraut, and I had literally just kind of put it out there on Facebook, on social media.
Wow.
And asked people like, would you guys be interested in this? And the feedback that I got was yes, absolutely. And also, I don't want to say overwhelming, but I was surprised at how much it was needed. And so in some ways, I'm the creator, but again, it's something bigger than me that's not only carrying it, but I fully trust that it's making its way to exactly who needs it. And so I have this in my imagination. The food is like a seed that's being planted for people. And I hope that that seed is a reminder of how we want to nourish ourselves and how we want to nourish each other.
Right.
And so it's food, right?
Yeah,
and we can and we can
Don't
look
forget
at
the chocolate hummus.
Oh my gosh, one of my favorites.
I'm gonna miss it.
I'll be back. I'll be back.
Oh, I know.
This will continue.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so much more than food. And it's so much more than me creating food. And so I think these little moments happen and they're like, it's almost like somebody told me the other day, it's like a game of connect the dots. And oftentimes we can never connect the dots going forward. We can only connect the dots going back.
Wow.
And so Comida Nutritiva was a game of connect the dots going back, where I can look back and be like, wow, all of these very serendipitous opportunities and moments happened. And even meeting you and how amazing you are at sharing what you love with other people. And that's why I think it's so perfect that you're in this stage of what you're doing, because this is truly your gift. And so I'm the founder of Comida Nutritiva, but it really is a community of people who have come together to enjoy, share, and inspire the creations.
It's amazing. And as you're sharing that story, I'm thinking about a podcast that you and I had briefly watched earlier around commitment. And so you being in the kitchen and making this food for yourself to nourish your own soul, and then the decision that you want to bring it out and launch it or birth it, there's a commitment there, right? And I know for myself, your story speaks to me in terms of, even with this podcast for me, 18 years in the making, it's like, once you make a commitment, there is a going back if you decide to not commit. But I feel like there's something really powerful that takes place whenever you're committed to your purpose, when you know that it's more than you. And so even for myself here, not knowing the dots that are going to connect forward, we spoke about that earlier. You mentioned that, with the ripple effect that we don't get to see. And it's beautiful. And so can you talk about how that felt to make a decision? You're going to launch a business. You're going to build this brand. And then even the name, where did that come from? And did you have times where you thought, I can't do this, or that you wanted to throw in the towel? And if so, how did you stay the course? Because I think it's really takes a lot of guts. If you're not an entrepreneur in the past as well, too, it's all the things, right? So.
Yeah. So I'm going to start by saying that I think the universe was kind and gentle to me along the process, because if I would have had any inkling of where I was going to be now, when I first began it, I don't know if I would have done it. Wow. And maybe I would have. Yeah. But what it's grown into and the community that has come together through it. I mean, I would have said yes to the community part of it, but I don't know if I would have said yes to like the grandness and the commitment that it has taken to not only time-wise and mentally and physically make the creations, but it is putting myself out there and being vulnerable. It's like Brene Brown talks about being in the arena, right? And I think anytime that we're creating anything, whether it is writing, doing a podcast, music, food creations, art, we are putting ourselves in the arena to be looked at and potentially judged, right? Whether it's judged in a really positive manner or the opposite of whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so, again, had I known in the beginning what this was going to grow into, I don't know if I would have said yes to it. So the universe was kind because I got to take what felt like sometimes challenging but doable steps in it. And so it started off with just selling and connecting with people online.
Right.
And then it was becoming part of some of the markets here in Mazatlan. And then I thought that was going to continue. And Comida Nutritiva and the universe had other plans for me. And so I was able to, or chose to, step back from the markets because the products were so well received and loved by people that I was really able just to connect either one-on-one with customers that I had met through markets or through online, and then also word of mouth, which was great. So this year, I had the opportunity to either grow it bigger by hiring somebody else who could help me create more food and perhaps even look at like a larger kitchen, commercial space, something like that. And so that was an opportunity that I had, and it was sort of a little bit of a fork in the road where I could choose to keep things as it was, or I could grow it bigger. And as I sat with it, the call was really to keep it what it was, because I know something about myself is that I'm not interested in human relation, or like not human relations. I'm not interested in managing other people.
Right.
And the intention that goes into the products that I'm creating is more important to me than the money that I'm making from the products. And I do believe that both are possible. Yeah. But the dynamics of owning a business and hiring employees and doing that in a different country is very different.
Wow, yeah.
And I recognized that wasn't where my passion and interest was. And so I kept it what it had grown into, and it felt like the right call.
It's interesting too, as you're sharing that. And I think about, again, many times when we're in business or we're entrepreneurs, we're looking at what everyone else is doing, right? And so you're looking at, you could be looking and maybe comparing or not, but looking at, well, I should be doing this next. Then is the next step to scale my business? Is the next step to, am I supposed to do this? Am I supposed to do that? And I know even for myself, sometimes we can get lost in losing ourselves in that. And so I love what you said around, you don't want it to be a certain way just because it could be better on paper, but how do you feel during the day? And so I feel the same way as well too, is that we don't have to, but it's important, I think, for my own intuitive self to say, okay, if I want what I want and I have a desire, am I going to enjoy not just the process, because I think that's where the magic is, but also the end result? And is my life where I want it to be and how I want it to be running, not just my business, but my life around my business? I think it's really important. And so one of the questions I would love to ask that I was pondering this morning for you is, what do you deem as success for you? Or also, what do you feel is what it looks like for you when you're in flow, when you're productive? You know, that could be that you've meditated, or what does that look like for you? Because success is so different for everyone, right? And so even just in that example of your business, knowing what you wanted and knowing what you don't want, and sifting and sorting and being okay with your answer, even if you're like, well, of course you should do this, and now that this is the next natural step. So what does that look like for you in terms of success?
So Comida Nutritiva, so it's Comida Nutritiva Foods That Nourish. And it is a business, but I also think that it somewhat has a life of its own. And it teaches me so much about me. And so it reflects back to me where I'm at in the creation. So there have been moments, I mean, it's been such a beautiful opportunity for learning on many levels. And there have been moments where it's reflected back to me that I'm being driven by things that my values have shifted. And so it helps me to realign with my values. And I'll try and be more clear about this. It's like, I'll give like a really easy, tangible example. Mm-hmm. When I start to become fearful about finances or uncomfortable financially for whatever reason, because life happens, and I'm being more driven by the desire to create money from the business, then I am being driven by the intention behind the business, which is planting a seed, reminding people of, their desire and need to nourish themselves, connecting people to healthy foods, to, like whatever it is that people need, whatever it is that they're going to get from the food that they're eating and enjoying. So my company has really reflected back to me where I am. Wow. And so when you ask of like, when do I know that I'm in resistance versus surrender or flow? I think that it's a sense that I have. And one is much more sort of forceful and controlling. Mm-hmm. And it feels like it's more based out of fear. It feels like it's being driven by ego. And there is resistance because I'm not allowing. I think whenever I'm in a place where I'm trying to, if I have a really specific direction that I want to move in and I know exactly what I want the outcome to be, right, and I'm kind of pushing it, then it's almost like anything that could come in to help with the process, to help carry it, to lighten the load, to bring in serendipitous people and moments. Mm-hmm. It's almost like we resist that because we're so trying to do it ourselves. Yeah. You and I love Abraham Hicks,
I was
right?
just going to bring, I was literally going to bring that in right now.
That
is beautiful.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
This is what happens, right? So it was meant to come into the space. So it's really that idea of thinking about floating down a river. And are we paddling against where the river is taking us? Are we paddling against the water? Mm-hmm. I had a beautiful conversation with a friend the other day, again, just about that idea of if we're in the ocean, are we swimming against the waves? Right. Or are we, if a rip current comes in, the best thing to do is just allow the rip current to carry you out and trust that at some moment in time, you will be able to get yourself back to a safe place, or you will be taken back to a safe place. Mm-hmm. And I think it's such a beautiful metaphor for life. And so when I feel like I'm really paddling, if I feel like I'm doing it on my own, and if I'm really specific about what I want the outcome to be, that's an indication to me that I'm in resistance and I'm not in the flow.
Yeah. And just listening to you say that as well, I feel like simply put is that we know when we're in alignment or when we're out of alignment, right? And so it's just the contrast that we have to have. We wouldn't know one without the other, right? It is what it is. And so I know that for my own journey, because I do want to ask you around like what brought you into this intuitive journey of being really connected to your spirit and your soul. We've got Mexican dogs in the background because this is the living room.
This is real.
I'm surprised I only heard one so far. And it's not mine.
Careful
and so, yeah. Oh, and then we'll talk about raising cats and dogs in a couple of minutes and trust. But one of the things that I realized too is just being on a level of awareness. I think that is the most important thing, right? We know what our core values are. And when we're driven by those values, there are times where we will be out of alignment and being okay with that. Right. And I feel like a lot of times we can put so many pressures on ourselves. Like I didn't do enough, you're not getting the results that you want, or you're letting yourself be run by ego momentarily, but being okay with that and be able to forgive ourselves, or not even be in a place where we need to forgive ourselves. And I think, for my own journey, even thinking about here, saying, oh, why did it take me so long to do this? Well, I was not ready until this moment, and being okay to know that divinity is always there. And so that there is no other better way, right? Mm-hmm. This is the way. And so in your spiritual journey, was there a defining moment for you when you found yourself having that type of perspective shift? Or were you always spiritual? Were you always driven by your intuition? And what does that look like for your path?
So I want to thank my mom right now.
Oh.
because, and not just my mom, but all of the women in my family and women in my family, in my familial lineage that came before me, because they were the ones that started this process. It didn't start with me.
Right.
But in my own life, I think a defining moment was when I had my daughter.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah,
That
I
is
would
a
love
journey. Beautiful Jade.
20, almost 28 years.
And you're only 28, so that doesn't make any sense.
I've decided to Benjamin Button, and I've hit a certain point. I'm going to stay here for a while, and then I'll just go back and crawl back into the womb. Anyways,
oh my gosh. So tell us about Jade.
So yeah. Life was a big struggle before I had her, and I was on a path that, had I stayed on it, would probably not have led me to being here in Lucy Smiles' living room with one of the most fabulous women that I know. And so going back to how we began this conversation, heeding the call.
Right.
So when I had her, I had the choice to continue to live the lifestyle that I was living. There was like a lot of alcohol, there was a lot of drugs, there was a lot of traumatic bad decisions that I was making. And so I got the opportunity to decide if I was going to continue down that path or if I was going to do something different. And again, I can't say that it was like it all happened at one time. It was like a moment by moment, day by day choice, like multiple choices that led me to, where I am right now. And so it was a defining moment, but I can't say that it was defining in that it all happened at once. And so that's very much like a reflection of everything that happened in my life or has happened when I was talking about the development of Comida Nutritiva, how it was sort of like saying yes to or making decisions every single day or in multiple moments every single day. And that's what parenting was very much like.
Wow. And you were quite young whenever you gave birth.
Yeah. So I was 15
Jade.
when I had her, or I think maybe I had just turned 16. It was 28 years ago. Wow. So yeah. And so, I was still growing up and learning about myself at the same time I was trying to raise a child. And so in some ways, it was a gift. We were talking today about, I don't know if we use these words, but it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know. And so at 15 or 16, I had no idea about being a parent. Like it wasn't even something that I had really considered or thought about. And so I was going into it without limitations on myself or without fears or worries, which in some way is a blessing. It's like that beginner's mind that we talked about. Once we start doing something and we get into it, that's when we start to maybe have fears that come up around it, or we start to create boxes for ourselves, or we think in more limited ways. Right. Because when we first begin something, it's like we're in that place of complete unknown where anything is possible. And it's the birthing place. It's being planted back into the earth. And so in some ways it was a gift being 15 or 16 because I didn't have any preconceived notions. And so, and at the same time, and I've told this to Jade, I said, when you know how I have contributed to your trauma, I want to be part of the process of helping you to heal that, right? Because all of us have that from when we were growing up. Even the people who say that they had like a perfect childhood and a perfect family, like that's amazing, good for you. Maybe there's not as much to unpack there. Maybe there is. But so I'm sure that, for her and I, there were challenges that came up, but but gifts also. Yeah.
Having said that as well too, because I look back on my own childhood and I think, okay, well, I had some things that, that took place in my life that were traumatic, like having surgeries as a young girl, like before I was 1 year old. So I know that there's a lot of that sense now that I've unpacked certain things of, feeling abandoned, being left alone. And so I was able to come to a place now that I'm in my mid 40s to look back and say, okay, I'm able to identify the different traumas that now are triggers, right? And so I really do believe as well too that this is my belief, that it's not just our timeline now where the traumas come, that it could be from past lineages. And so how do you feel about that? Is there anything that resonates with you on that level of the lineages of the feminine energy or even masculine energy from past lives that can carry us into now and the healing process that we are gifted to do that? There's so many different ways of doing that. So I would love your take on that.
Okay, so one of the
Loaded
first
question.
one of the first things that came to mind there is a conversation that you and I have had before, and I think many women have had similar conversations with different words, and it is being burned at the stake, right? Whether we think about that metaphorically, right, as a metaphor for different traumas from whether it's past lives or from our ancestors,
Right.
or from the divine feminine, the collective of the divine feminine, or whether we think about it as the possibility that maybe it has happened at some point in time. So I completely agree with you, or it really resonates with me when you talk about this idea of not only healing what we experience in this lifetime. I also firmly believe my truth is that I was brought here for a very specific reason.
Yeah.
And, that my soul sort of had a purpose, and that part of that purpose was to transform and to learn through this experience that we call life. Again, another conversation that you and I have had at other times is we can't take anybody else where we haven't been ourselves.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And so if we haven't gone through those challenging times or those more difficult moments, those dark nights of the soul, then we're not able to understand anybody else who has.
Right.
And I think all of us have. And I think that we connect not only on our bright, positive, and light notes where we can inspire each other and love and be excited and joyful and passionate. But sometimes where we connect more is in those places that have been wounded within us. What's that? I think it's a Rumi quote. It's like the crack is where the light gets in.
Yes.
Right. But I think that crack is also the place where we're able to connect with one another.
And I think for me, just listening to your stories and knowing so much more about you than we're able to do in an hour on a show, on a podcast, is the ability to know a couple of things that come to me is, we think about the globe. We think about what's going on in the world at any given moment, war, not to get into that conversation, but dis-ease in the world and chaos that happens and disruption that happens. Sometimes it can be very daunting. We can think of how can we help change the world? How can we help change the world? And Bruce Lipton said it really well on a podcast that I watched a few months ago, where he said, and Lee Harris also mentioned, so a couple of our wise men that we love to follow, just mentioning that it really just is about us healing ourselves, and that in turn creates that ripple effect, right? And one thing that Lee Harris had said was, pay attention to your address, pay attention to your own address, like your own home. And that hit me, and I thought, that's all that we need to do. So, and we will go into helping other creatures on the streets with the dogs and cats that have come into our lives, but being able to know that that's our contribution. So sometimes for myself, living in Mexico and knowing, the devastation that happens with dogs and cats and, homeless animals and obviously homeless people, but I've got the heart for dogs and cats, is it's not about helping all of them, but how can we help one at a time? And it's almost like the story of the starfish on the beach, right? I could kibosh the story, but the little boy on the beach with millions of starfish, and the old gentleman looking at him saying, like, what are you trying to do? Because he's saving one starfish at a time. But that's what makes all of it possible, right? So we don't have to be responsible to save the world, but how we heal our own self, or even how we support our friends in our community, that is healing the world. So do you have any insight on that, or how do you feel about that? Is there any insight that you want to share?
I think that in moments where I have felt insignificant in being able to make an impact on a global scale. It really is empowering to remember that it's like throwing a stone into a pond and you see the ripple effects that happen, but that stone could never know the impact that it's had. It can't actually see it. And so it's going back to that place of trusting that, and it's interesting, I'll share a story after that's coming to my mind, but it is trusting that if I am moving through the world with as much love as I possibly can, and that looks different in each moment. Some moments look better than others. But
you just want water to show up in your apartment.
All I want is that's why
just shower.
Agua, por favor. Just more than a sponge bath. But yeah, every day is different, right? But if my intention is to meet each person, every creature, the earth, every moment with as much love as possible in that moment, as possible for me, that I can trust that from there, it is by not default, but sort of default, but that I can trust that the ripple effects from that are going to have an impact that I don't even understand. And it's letting go of, I was talking about before, how if I can really clearly see what the end result is going to be, then I'm in resistance and I'm in ego. And so we keep all of these things.
Dora, when you say that, we'll go to Dora. So I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to bring that around because it really goes back to a couple of the things that we've shared. So
yes, absolutely. And so when I know exactly how something is going to play out, that's when I'm actually in resistance. And that's when I'm coming from a place of fear. The story that I wanted to mention was I had a really interesting experience. I did a workshop. It was a Remembering the Power of Our Heart workshop. And I did it yesterday and it was absolutely beautiful. So it's a woman, she's also in Mexico and she's a beautiful musician. And we did mantras and we sang together and we were just journaling and talking. And one of the things when I tuned into my heart and I was doing my journaling, at first it was like I was very much in the mind, right? Because it was like tuning into your heart space to see what it is that your heart has to tell you. Like, what is it that your heart wants you to know right now? What is it that your heart wants you to say? And so at first it was like I very much was in the mind, and then I was able to tune into my heart. And what I realized is that it's not my heart that stays small. My heart is like, and the energy of love of the heart is infinite and boundaryless. What keeps my heart small is my mind.
Wow.
And so if I can just be in the presence of love, that love is, it's not just in here, right? What keeps it in here is my mind. But if I can be in the true and authentic space of love, that goes beyond borders, right? It goes beyond like this chair, this room, this city. And so I think that that's how the world heals, is by us coming into our hearts more.
I love that. And question for you too, as I'm hearing you, it's resonating with me so much. Your take, your insight on how important do you think it is to be healthy, and do you feel like there's a correlation between manifesting and our physical vessel? Right. So I want to touch on a couple of ways that you and I've manifested when we're like, we need to manifest from here and we do not know how it's going to unfold, but it always has. And so I want to touch on a couple of things. Number one, I do believe that everything is on purpose. We talked about that. We can't choose. We don't want that to be on purpose. That's definitely not on purpose. We had that laugh the other day. But what do you feel around the importance of self-care, and what does that look like? Because for me, I believe, and again, work in progress, is that we're not just what we eat, what we drink, what we think. And so do you feel like there's a correlation around supporting your thoughts through nutrition? What are some of the things that you find that you do that are supportive of you? And I know we do a couple of things together that you've reintroduced to me that's been super helpful for me. So what is your take on the correlation of manifesting, attraction, the law of magnetism, and creating a healthy environment? physically?
So my belief on that is that our bodies are the vehicle, the vessel that allow us to take our purpose and bring it into the world. And so this is going to sound so cliche, but I really do believe and try and treat my body like it is a temple.
I love that.
And again, it's going back to some days are better than others. Yep. I also really love tequila, and I don't overindulge in it too much anymore, but do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so it is having compassion for ourselves. It's not about getting hard or down on ourselves, but coming as best we can from that place of love. And I do think if we are loving ourselves, that the self-care comes naturally.
I love that.
I know that in the past, I've had thoughts around self-care being like selfish or overindulgent. And so, and I think this comes from maybe my paradigm of being a mom, and also one of the archetypes that I'm transforming, which is like the caretaker of other people, which I think can be a really beautiful thing. And it can also go into like the shadowy side of caretaking for others, where we're not actually caring for ourselves. And it's more of like a martyrdom, or we're trying to save other people. And so that's been one of my journeys in this lifetime as well. And so it's coming to that healthy place of, you know what, I can take the time, because it requires,
dedicated time.
Absolutely. We are talking about how our to-do list, if we make a to-do list for the day, oftentimes it's very much in activity. It's like, I want the things that I want to get done. But how often do we put, on that to-do list, like feed myself really well? I don't know if I ever have, right? And it's sort of, those are the things that fill in the gaps of the busyness. And so part of the gift of being in Mexico and actually being able to slow down life, the pace of life. For anyone that hasn't lived in Mexico, the pace of life is very different here.
Oh my goodness.
When do things get done?
I have a friend, Dwayne. I don't know if you know Dwayne and Jenny. So Dwayne, amazing fellow Canadian. He was one of the first people that I met when we got to Mexico. And he's an entrepreneur. He's into hypnotherapy. And the first thing that he said, as he sat in our living room to come and meet us for the first time, we were on a Facebook group already and finally got to meet him in person. And it was probably a few days into us being in Mexico. So I don't know the difference. And he says, I just have to let you know, it's really difficult to be productive here. And I thought, oh my goodness. But what I have seen since then is what is productive to me. So that for me, I walk slower than I ever used to. I remember my beautiful friend and landlord, Jordana, had said she sees me walking because she lives next door. She used to see me walking the dogs really fast. And I realized that my walking is so different after months of being here.
Wow.
I am slowing down on all things. And it's not that I'm less productive. It's just that for me, what I deem as being successful in my day has completely shifted. Wow. But yet everything is still getting done. And another example that I wanted to share is how I actually got into finally creating my podcast at the perfect divine time was I hired a coach, Julie, who's amazing. And she just resonates on all levels with me. And I said to her, I was in the doing, I was in the ego. And I said to her, she still fulfilled my request, but I said, I feel like I need a playbook. I need a checklist. This is what I need to build a successful podcast. And she said, well, that's so interesting. She goes, because what came up for me, ironically, in my morning meditation, she literally said this to me, she's amazing, is that you just need to emulate what you want to share. Just emulate who you want to be to succeed in this. And I thought, the only thing I need to do is be. Just be. The checklist will get done. It'll get created. The playbook will get created. But the most important thing that I've learned in terms of just getting to this point today with you is just having to be the person that I want to share, right? And so everything else gets taken care of itself. But if we don't help this first and take care of this first, it's going to be more of a struggle to get to where we want to be or where we want to go. And so I've learned that as well too. And it's not about being perfect. Every day is a work in progress, but I know the difference of when I am treating myself better, I feel better. not just from a feel better about myself, but I feel better overall. And I do see more of the magic whenever I am slowing down, whenever I am treating my body with the goodness that it deserves to run like a vehicle, because this is our vessel that we use to create and to be and to build relationships and to build businesses. So it's beautiful to know that all we really have to do is just to be, and then the rest will show itself. So I want to turn on that and talk about rescuing dogs and cats on the street. So one of the things that I remember a year ago with you, and I'd love for you to share Dora, the story of Dora, and also how with letting go, the perfect outcome had taken place. So, and Dora is not the first and last of the many four-leggeds that we've rescued off the streets, but we'll start with her. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. The adorable. Dora the Explorer.
I'm telling you.
Okay.
Oh.
So yeah, I think it was pretty much exactly a year ago on the full moon.
Yeah.
And it's funny because at first I thought that I had really found this dog, right? Again, there's the rescuer coming in where I'm like, I found this dog and I rescued this dog. But in so many ways, my story changed to she found me and she taught me so many things. And what she taught me was unconditional love. This is a dog who probably had not been treated very well, she was really, really hungry. She wasn't in good shape. And she showed up in life with so much love and so much trust, regardless of what she had been through. And so I could see myself in that. And it was also a mirror of where I was not embodying that still.
Wow.
And so you and I worked our magic. I'm going to say you worked your magic because you were such an amazing part of that process. And with so many of the animals that have come into and through my experience, you've been just this place of unconditional support and manifestation for their highest good. And so I also used to think, going back to this idea of rescuing animals, I'm kind of on a little bit of like a Buddhist journey right now, learning more about Buddhism. And one of the ideas in Buddhism that really resonates with me is that everything, creatures, rocks, humans, have consciousness and the ability to awaken through things. And so I'm learning the process of surrendering. And Dora was a huge, I don't want to say first lesson in that because I think it's been like since I was born that I've been learning this, but she was just such an opportunity to embody that idea of surrendering and trusting that, number one, it's not just us. Right. It's not just me trying to find the best outcome for this dog. Like, she also is part of the creation. And I have funny stories about that, you know. And so she has her own sort of very important part and piece in the story, and that she can also help to manifest her what's next, not just me coming in.
She was contributing to her own
amazing
manifestation.
Yes,
We were just...
I was a vehicle or a vessel that stepped in for a fairly short period of time in her life and assisted amongst many other people against her own creation, against her new with her new family, right, in her next steps. And that's been such a beautiful gift, is to remember, not just with animals, but also with humans, that we are all sovereign. Right. And we all get to make our own choices. And I'm not responsible for the choices that you make, or I'm not responsible for the outcome of things. I might have a part that I get to play in it, but I'm just really a piece of a much bigger, more beautiful web and puzzle. Yeah.
Also, in sharing that as well, too, how we're not responsible for others' growth or their choices. It got me to thinking as well, too, is that, you know, one of the sayings, I guess you could say, is that I like to share, and that Anthony, my husband, and I say, is that that's not my jacket. That's not my coat. And so many times in our lives, we can be putting on other people's coats and sometimes not realize it, or like you said, maybe playing the martyr role or whatever that looks like. And then on the other side as well, too, I also think, just as we're not responsible for others, I have been finding myself playing and toying with the realization of, like, where am I putting expectations on others? right? So like, I'll be better if you act a certain way, or not only are like not being responsible for them, but also maybe having expectations on other people. And as you were sharing that story, I was thinking about, how do I feel light and when do I not feel light, is when I'm realizing that I'm wanting to manipulate a situation, right? Not wanting to manipulate a human. Like, I don't go with the intention of, if I can manipulate this person, but where in my life do I realize that I need to just let go and let things be, and divine will take care of the rest, right? And it's not about someone else being or doing anything, or me being responsible for them, but just going back to being as well too. And so it's interesting because we've talked about that so many times. And so what are some of the tools or the influences that you have in your life that have allowed you to bring it back, right? Because it is a discipline. Eating healthy is a discipline, working out is a discipline, but also our mental discipline and our soul discipline to stay connected. And as you'd mentioned as well too, some people come in and out. I think we talked before the podcast was aired. There are certain influences that come in and out of your life. Like for me, it was the same. Abraham Hicks would come in for years and then go away for years and then come back in, now currently in. And who knows when that will shift. And Wayne Dyer had come in and then came out, and now he's back in. So what are some of the tools and conduits for you that allow you to feel that state of bliss within your soul?
Mm-hmm. So definitely people come in waves. And I'm always getting the messages that I need to receive. The question is whether or not I'm tuned in enough to hear them. Because I think that whether you want to call it God or the universe or our intuition or serendipitous signs, they're always there for us. But are we in a state where we can actually hear them? And so wrapping this back around to how Mexico has given me the gift of slowing down. So about, I don't know, almost a year into being in Mexico, I can remember like being pretty much brought to my knees, both like metaphorically and physically, because I had this story of needing to get enough done in order for that to prove my worth, right? So it was like the more that I could get done in a day, the more productive that I could be, the more that I could have like, you know, put on my resume, or like the more boxes that I had checked off on my to-do list. That was giving me a sense of my importance and my purpose. And so the reason for me being on my knees, like snot crying ugly, the whole bit, was literally because it was the breaking down of that belief. Because in Mexico, like we said, if I'm to bring my Canadian conditioning and my ability to get things done rapidly and be productive in Canada and bring that paradigm down here, it will bring you to your knees. And that was obviously the place that I needed to come to. And so the things and the people that lifted me back up out of those moments do come in cycles. But it's being able to hear what those messages are. So for me right now, one person that's really resonating with what I need to hear is Kyle Cease.
Who's completely new to me, and you shared him yesterday. So I was binge watching his shorts on YouTube, and wow, where has he been all my life?
Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
And, amazing human. He's been on such an interesting journey also. And one of the things that he said that came to me as I was listening to you is, we're not owed any more than this moment. So when you're talking about expectations that you might have of other people, which I totally understand, even expectations that we don't recognize that we have, right? Like, I need you to message me so many times in a day in order to feel like you care about me, or I need you to behave this way so that I feel important to you, or so that, you know, whatever it is, or I need you to commit to me so that I know what my next 6 months or a year looks like, which we actually don't know anyways, right? And so if I bring myself back to, nobody owes me anything besides the moment that they're in with me. And even this moment, like even life doesn't owe me anything, right? but that in each moment that allows me to like actually be present and I get to be with you, because who I'm interacting with isn't who you were yesterday.
Right.
And it's not who you're going to be when I talk to you later this afternoon,
Yeah.
but it's just who am I with in this moment, in this conversation.
Wow. And how freeing is that? When you go back to saying that we're all sovereign, whether you're four-legged, two-legged, a rock, a tree, it's brilliant. And it really is that simple. And I think we're so good, obviously, all of us, myself included, on a daily basis, is just complicating the shit out of things, excuse my language, but truly. And when you go back to think about this very moment, nothing else needs to get done. Nothing else needs to be addressed, just this moment. How freeing is that? And maybe that's just the one thing that, I mean, I'm taking so many nuggets, but I needed to hear that, because even getting ready to do the podcast this morning and things weren't working. And I thought, I felt better even when things weren't working, knowing that there's nothing that I needed to do. Just have patience, not try to figure it out. There are certain things that tactically you want to play around with, but I felt in my serenity, if you will, just knowing that, what if it all works out? And I even have that on my screensaver on my phone. My backsplash is, what if it all works out? And I've had it for months and I don't want to change it. I'm like, I need to see this every day. Mm-hmm. It's like brushing your teeth. Like Jim Rohn says, you can't brush your teeth on Monday and your teeth are still clean on Friday. You have to brush them every day. And sometimes for people, that's the only thing they can get done. Sometimes in life, just what is the one thing that you could do to move yourself forward? Because we do all have seasons in our lives where there's the dark night of the soul. And another thing that a mentor of mine had shared, and I shared this with you yesterday, is we're one of three places. We're either going through something, in something, or coming out of something, like just about to go through something, or we're in it, like the snotty cry, or coming out of it. And so I think one thing that I know for my own self is I've never not gotten out of something that I was in. And what trust is that? And what power is that to know that, what if it all works out? And so what are your thoughts on that in terms of things working out and just that coming to that place of trust for you? And how has Buddhism allowed you to see that perspective of surrender, or that place of just letting go?
So I'm a quote junkie.
Me too. Bring it.
I don't remember. Yeah. I don't remember who said this, but it's, this too shall pass.
Oh.
And absolutely everything, right? We want to cling to those moments that feel really good, and we want to push away those moments that feel really bad.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not the pocket of life. So Buddhism, another quote, suffer what there is to suffer and enjoy what there is to enjoy.
Right.
And I think in every moment there is the duality of both, because even if we're in a moment that is beautiful and it's feeling really good, behind the scenes of that is the recognition that it's not going to last forever.
Right.
And so there's there can be, the clinging comes from the fear that we're not going to have it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But it takes us out of being really present and in that moment. And when you were sharing what was on your screen, and it's like, what if this works out? What if we asked ourselves that question more often than the question that often gets asked, whether it's out loud or unconsciously or even just in our minds, which is, what if this doesn't work out?
Right. Yeah.
And I think everything is always working out for me. Everything is always working out for us, right? We are being carried by something that is even greater than we are. And at the same time, I think that we are just starting to remember how magical we are, right? And so it's not something that is outside of us. When I say we are being carried, or I am being carried by something, I'm not putting that as something that's outside of me on a pedestal.
Right.
I truly believe that whatever that inherent magic is everywhere, in everything, and also within me.
Yeah, I love it, because there's no exception. And something that you had said too around just like honoring the, what's to suffer and what's to enjoy, is that maybe even just coming from a place of not labeling something as good, bad, or right or wrong, but just an experience, right? And so I, in my life, have many, tumultuous times that I've chosen or created or were created that I experienced. And the surrender has always been something that allowed me to get through it with more lightness. So I would love, in closing, I know you love quotes. If you wanted to, is there any quote or any type of advice or insight as we're closing out our beautiful conversation that you feel has helped you in the past, or something that you're going through right now that you're carrying with you as kind of a groundingness, or a quote of some sort that you want to share before we end this beautiful conversation? Because I don't want, there'll be many more conversations, but yeah, I would love to know your heart as we close out. Is there anything that's calling for you to share?
Yeah. I would love to wrap this back around, like full circle, full figure eight, to how we began. We talked about, you brought in the idea of heeding the call.
Yeah.
So I'm heeding the call for my next journey, where I'm actually going to learn from and be inspired by the author of the book that you and I have read, that we referenced earlier, Heeding the Call.
Yeah.
But it's not a quote. My wish for everybody is that we heed our individual calls, because I think, all of us are unique and it's all going to look different. But if we are tapped in and tuned into that place within us that is calling us to say yes, even when it doesn't feel uncomfortable, and to heed the call to come from that place of love, I think that's what's going to change the world.
I love it. And having supportive community, I think, as well too. Because again, I think about my journey here with you, and you've been such a support in the ups and craze and fun and puppies and kittens and all of those things in between. We're taking a break, everyone. No more kittens on my doorstep for a few months at least.
Yeah, just let the universe know.
Figure it out.
We're done for now.
But no, if it happens, I'll be fine. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to you, because you've inspired me. And you have been nothing short of just such a huge support for me here. And so me watching your journey, even though I'm going to miss you because you're physically leaving Mexico in the next couple of weeks to be on your journey. And we will put the show in the show notes, Jaki's book, and her link, if it's called to anyone to explore what that looks like as well. But I'm just really grateful, because my dream has been to have these conversations that we're already having be heard by other people. Right. And so my whole desire for building this podcast is just to be able to allow the opportunity for those who heed the call. That's something that you've shared today, whether it's whatever it is, right? That they could say, okay, there's a part of Sien's story inside of them that they're ready to ignite, that maybe they were afraid to ignite, that they feel will help them to move on to that next path. So it's almost like simultaneous to your desires is what my desire is for this podcast. So
yay. Yeah,
we did beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's cheers to our sweet sanctum tea.
All right.
I'm so grateful for you.
Salud.
Love
and
it.
Thank you for anyone who listens to a minute or all of this podcast, because it's real.
It is real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get your knees up, cross your legs, and get ready. So thank you, everyone. And that is a wrap. Hey friends, thank you again for following and tuning in to the Lucy Smiles Living Room podcast. It really does truly support my mission to help inspire you through our beautiful guests that I also want to thank, who have come on to share their beautiful stories of transformation. If you want to connect with me privately, you can actually go right to my website, lucysmiles.com. Feel free to send to me a personal email. You can also catch my newsletter by subscribing, which also includes my weekly intuitive messages. If you're on social media, you can follow me with my handle, I am Lucy Smiles. And if this was inspiring to you and something helped support you on whatever the journey is that you are going through, please feel free to review, write a comment, and most importantly, if you can subscribe and share this episode and all our other episodes, that would be amazing. My dream and my mission is to truly help you to follow the magic that ignites your inner essence. And so until next time, we will catch you soon. I hope to catch you on the next episode.